Hi everyone. Now we start the new chapter, and that is chapter 4, and the chapter is all about language. And I'll explain to you why, as critical thinkers or learners of critical thinking, we need to concern ourselves with language. So let's dive into it. So here are some remarks before you start to read the chapter. And it is that as humans, we communicate through language by speaking, writing, or even signing, right? It is an inescapable fact that we are forced to use language to understand each other. Can you imagine if you had to carry around a big sack of things to show what whenever we mean something? That might work with some things, but how do we talk about concepts or abstract things? So then we are forced to use language, and because whenever we are forced to use language, we necessarily bring in experiences from our lives. And since everyone's lived experience is different, we attach different meanings to words than other people do. So language is ripe for misunderstanding and misinterpretation. So it is very important for critical thinkers to understand that in order for us to communicate arguments to our audience, to convince people of conclusions, we must present clearly what we mean by the words and the sentences that we use. Failing to do so can lead to miscommunication. And as we saw in chapter 1, precision is one of the standards for critical thinking. So, how do we bring precision into our language? We have to avoid vagueness, overgeneralization, and ambiguity because they obfuscate rather than clarify what we mean. So these three words in everyday life are used synonymously, but within the context of critical thinking, they are different. For example, vagueness typically applies to a word or group of words whose meaning is broad and fuzzy and can be subject to personal feelings. For example, in the book, um, it gives example of, quote, anyone behaving immorally will be severely punished, end of quote. The word immorally here is vague because it means something different to different people. Um, Overgeneralization, on the other hand, is typically a phrase or a sentence which sometimes is reduced to one word on purpose that tries purposefully, yeah, and I have to say again, purposefully to evade a specific answer. So it's unspecific on purpose. For example, drawing on my own life, I asked my younger child, what did you do today? And he says, stuff. Now, that is not vague. It is a willful attempt to obfuscate, right? He doesn't on purpose want to answer my question. So, ambiguity as a third hindrance to clarity and precision is also a way to obfuscate, but more on the lexical level. So, ambi means both. So, when ambiguity occurs, it's by intention or accident. It is due to the word or phrase having two different meanings. For example, this joke: how do you make turtles fast? Think of an answer, okay? Just for a couple of seconds. So my answer is to take their food away. How many of you thought of ways to make their turtle move faster? Or how many of you thought of taking the food away? This joke works because of the two meanings of the word fast, and because within the context of turtle, we think of speed and lack thereof. So we see that it is very important for anyone who is making an argument to be clear about definitions of the words and phrases that they use. So there are different types of definitions that we use to convey what we mean with precision. So stipulative definition is using a word in a new way or creating a new word or phrase to make a point. For example, someone who loves and eats a lot of cereal, you may call them a serial killer. That's a new word or phrase that you coin to make a definition. Persuasive definition is one that is used by someone to purposefully influence attitudes or opinions of the audience. So it is used very often in defining concepts that people have very strong feelings about. For example, capital punishment or abortion and things like that. And when you come across these hot button issues or phrases, I want you to sort of keep your level headedness. Okay. And you can also use enumerative definition by using examples for or individual members of what the word refers to, as in saying English, German, French, Chinese for the word language. So you enumerate the members of that word. Or you can use subclass to define a word, such as copperhead, cobra, python, or for snake. Yeah, be careful here. All subclass definitions are enumerative, but not all enumerative definitions are subclass. Okay. You can also use etymological definitions by going back to where the word came from, as the above example that I gave for ambi, meaning both. Synonymous definition is used by giving an alternate word for the same thing, such as toboggan for sled. Now, these synonymous definitions are also context dependent, meaning if you are from a region where it snows a lot, you probably think of toboggan as sled. But if you are from a region where it doesn't snow, such as North Carolina, you might think of toboggan as a hat. Okay, and that is because we don't see snow, so we don't sled. So toboggan came to sort of symbolize the hat that you wear rather than the instrument that you use. So lastly, the definition by genus and difference identifies by general class and differentiating quality of that class from others. You're not going to run across this as often as the others. And there are other strategies for defining, but these are the ones presented in the book. So as a rule, all of these definitions have to be informative. Okay, so you should strive to convey information with your definitions rather than to confuse the audience, such as by giving circular reasoning. Okay, so then this leads us to the use of emotive language in arguments. Language can be manipulated to evoke emotions in the audience, and as such, it is very often used to slant the truth and to sway the audience with subjectivity rather than objectivity. Examples of emotive language include euphemisms and appeal to evoke strong emotions in order to persuade the audience of your view. So you can use a persuasive definition and use emotive language to argue more about how you want the audience to feel. Okay, there are obviously acceptable euphemisms, but when they're used to hide the truth, they are unacceptable. The same is true of dysphemisms, the opposite of euphemism, as well. Political campaigns use emotive language to persuade voters to vote for certain candidates. Okay, so for assignment 2, number 2 for this chapter, you're to give an example of a political campaign ad that exploits voters' emotions and describe how that ad uses emotive language or other devices to persuade voters. So be on the lookout and think about how you would evaluate that ad. And why do we do all of this? Because we're members of a democracy. And as members of a democracy, it is very important for us to stay as objective as possible and to be able to wade through all the hindrances to clear definitions and emotions so that we use our head, right, to vote. Okay, so that is very important, and that's why we talk about language when we talk about critical thinking. Okay, bye.